The final previews for Gotham Knights are live, and while none of them are extremely negative, a lot of previewers still have their doubts about the game. There's also a lot of good things to talk about, including some interesting new details on Batman's influence in the game, an unexpected enemy faction, and some very interesting details on the available outfits. So we'll discuss the good and the bad right here. Let's not waste any time. Leaving a like on the video would really help us out. Subscribe for way more Gotham Knights content, and let's go. So overall, one thing that was unanimously praised in all the previews was the writing and the story. The interactions between the knights in the Belfry seem to work really well, with a lot of tension between Red Hood and Nightwing at the start, as the team is of course still adjusting to a world without Batman. And the same goes for the villains, as we get to see Harley Quinn's response to hearing about Batman's death, as well as her interactions with the new knights, which should be very interesting. But though he is gone, Batman will still make a virtual appearance as your guide in your training sessions, as you can see here in gameplay from Caboose. Link to his channel will be in the video description. There's one basic training mission, one for momentum abilities and one for advanced training, and they're introduced by what I assume to be a holographic version of Batman. I'm guessing you play these training missions in the Belfry, but it's a really cool touch to have Bruce teach his proteges as they're stepping up to take over his role of protecting Gotham City. Although I am a bit intrigued by him mentioning us to let go of our grief. Does that mean he knew he was going to die before recording these messages? Food for thought for sure. After Batman's demise, both the police and citizens in Gotham have kind of lost faith, so we have to earn their trust, something that will be reflected in the dialogue from NPCs on the street, which should help make the city feel more alive, as their responses will become increasingly more positive the more things you do in the city. But even so, some previews still noted that this game's version of Gotham City feels a bit empty. Not necessarily in regards to the amount of enemies you're able to beat up, but more in regards to things like NPCs or interesting landmarks to make the city feel more alive. It's especially a big contrast when compared to Gotham City in Arkham Knight, which also had next to no civilians on the street, but made the city almost feel like its own character thanks to the stellar art direction, rain effects, and lighting. Next to civilians, there will of course also be cops roaming around the city who will start to fight with criminals if they encounter them, like we also see in this prison riot mission. But perhaps more interesting is that we can also fight these GCPD officers if we want, although the game really makes it clear we're not supposed to assault them. A tutorial pop-up notes that they are tough opponents who do not offer rewards or XP when defeated, so we should probably steer clear of them. Although I do remember that owl on the Gotham police badge from the reveal trailer, so maybe a clash with the GCPD is inevitable when we eventually go after the Court of Owls. And speaking of fighting, the receptions to the combat system have been a bit mixed so far. I think the biggest thing here is the fact that Gotham Knights is not an Arkham game, which is funnily enough something we already discussed in our previous video, which we'll link to at the end of this one. The main difference here being that the rhythm of hitting and countering opponents has been changed up significantly. The knights cannot counter an attack, instead using dodges to get out of the way. Scoring a perfect dodge will allow you to perform a counter hit, but you can no longer just stand still and let 10 goons pummel on you while you counter their every hit. I personally like it to have both options, so I will definitely miss the ability to parry, but I think as soon as I'm used to the switch in gameplay approach, Gotham Knights combat will be pretty enjoyable. In exchange for that, there is more of a focus on the momentum abilities, which are way more than just flashy ways for you to deal more damage. It really seems important to use the right moves against the right enemies, like using a piercing attack to counter an enemy armored attack, so the ones indicated with the red glare. And you do of course need momentum for these abilities, which is indicated by this white bar under your ability wheel. You build it up by performing attack chains, but defensive actions like perfect dodges and team-oriented moves in co-op will also fill up your momentum. There's even a mechanic called timed strikes that lets you build more momentum if you time your attack inputs correctly. So the better you play, the more momentum you build up, but with these abilities effectively working as a counter to specific enemies and abilities, the downside is that it can slow combat down a lot. You'll notice this especially against the larger brute enemies, which can require a lot of hits to defeat without the abilities, and it does seem like we'll be fighting these targets a lot throughout the game, with some different variants for each enemy faction. I really hope there will be enough variation in encounters and enemies, as some people already felt the repetition kick in after a 3-hour preview session. But one thing that should keep the repetition away at least is switching between the different characters, which you can of course do between missions at the Belfry. Each hero should play very differently, not only in their traversal, which is unique, especially looking at Robin's teleport or Red Hood's mystical leap, but also their momentum abilities. Batgirl's beatdown, which delivers a series of quick strikes against a single single target is very in your face, for instance, whereas Robin's decoy that, surprise surprise, creates a decoy to draw attention away from you is the exact opposite. What the Knights do share are similar styles of suits that will still look pretty different on each character. And a lot of them, in fact probably all of them except for the Nightwatch and Beyond suit styles that are exclusive to the Deluxe and Collector's editions, were able to be viewed in the demo, as you can see here in footage from J-Shock Blast. I'm personally digging the Batgirl suits the most, but each character definitely has some standouts that I wouldn't mind running around Gotham in. And you can of course customize the cowl, the bat symbol, the gloves and the boots of an armor, as well as change the color of both your suit and your bat cycle, so there's a lot of room for personalization. And there are two suit styles that I think are linked to the story in some very interesting ways thanks to their names, those being the Talon suit and the Knighthood suit. The first one is obviously inspired by the Court of Owls, with Talon being the name they use for their elite assassins as well, so I'm guessing that we'll have to earn it by either defeating the court or at least a high-ranking enemy from that faction in order to wear this suit. And by the way, I love the fact that on each of the Talon outfits the silver parts are made to resemble feathers, which is very cool. But in my opinion, the most interesting suits are the Knighthood suits, which feel like a final evolution of each hero's basic suit. Knighthood is of course a big theme in the game, with also each knight having their own skill tree with the same name, but for each of the 4 characters the idea of knighthood comes down to the same thing, which is picking up where Batman left off. So while we unlock the knighthood skills early on, I think this suit will probably be the last style we unlock, as it is what completes our character's transformation into the next Dark Knight, plus it's also the final suit in the menu. And no doubt we're keeping the title of Dark Knight, by the way, considering the fact that all of these outfits are predominantly black. And the idea of your character stepping up to take the Batman's mantle was something that has been referenced by multiple people. Details on it are still vague, but it sounds like at the end of the story only one of our 4 characters will step up to become Gotham's next symbol. GameSpot literally stated in their preview that there will eventually be a point that one of them will need to accept knighthood and officially become the protector of Gotham in the same way that Batman was. Which to me also sounds like a perfect moment to introduce that knighthood suit, right? I also can't help but think that getting to this point might be the endgame IGN has talked about in their earlier previews, but that's just speculation on my end. There have also been some smaller reveals that we were able to glimpse from the new footage, like the game's difficulty options, which are the typical very easy, medium and hard. And there's also seemingly a skip puzzle option for if you like the combat more than you like the investigation parts. And while co-op is looking great overall in the new gameplay we got, I do think that the boss fight against Harley Quinn looks much better solo than it does when 2 players are fighting her. I just hope that's not the case for the other bosses in the game. So to sum up, should you be worried for Gotham Knights? Well, I think that kind of depends on what you want out of it. If you're expecting a spiritual successor to Arkham Knight, especially when it comes to combat, you will probably be disappointed. Gotham Knights is clearly trying to be something different, and while part of whether that works depends on if these new ideas are well implemented, a part of it will also depend on our own expectations. And from what we've seen so far, I think if we go into this game with more of an open mind, again especially when it comes to combat, it should be a lot of fun. Subscribe for way more Gotham Knights content, as you can of course expect a lot of tips and tricks from us when the game launches, and leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. If you want, you can watch our previous video on Gotham Knights with some more recent details on the game. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.